Well, today is Thursday, and if you're of certain Christian traditions, you call it Maundy Thursday, M-A-U-N-D-Y, Maundy Thursday. Again, I don't really know why we call it that. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find out. But today is a day where we lean into Jesus gathering with His disciples in John chapter 13. And the disciples have met Jesus in an upper room, and as they walk into the room, Jesus sets His love upon them. In the final hours of His life, and Jesus poured out Himself in love to His followers. And with His last breath, He pours out His love towards sinners like you and me as He dies on a cross. In preparation for this death on the cross, Jesus demonstrates His sacrificial love in service to His disciples. Today, Jesus prepares our hearts for what is coming. That's what He was doing with His disciples in John chapter 13. And Jesus was preparing them for His own death. In the same way, Jesus is preparing us now for what He has offered us through His death on the cross and His resurrection from the dead. In John chapter 13, verse 1, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that His hour had come, that He should depart from this world to the Father, having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end. Just a few things I want us to see about this passage. First, Jesus knew, and Jesus knows. Jesus knew that His hour had come. He knew that the time of His crucifixion on a cross in the place of sinners for sin was about to be upon Him. In a few hours, He would start walking toward the Garden of Gethsemane through the streets of Jerusalem, down through the Kidron Valley, up into the Mount of Olives. He would approach the Garden of Gethsemane and He would begin to pray earnestly. There He would be arrested and then taken away to be tried by the Sanhedrin and before Pontius Pilate. He knew that all of this was taking place, so He was preparing His disciples for that season. And Jesus knew then, and friends, Jesus knows still. He knows what's happening in our world. He knows what's happening in this season of your life and mine. There's nothing that has taken place in the last month, the last 2 months, the last 2 years, the last decade that has caught Him by surprise. He knows what's coming on the horizon in your life and mine. He knows what's happening even in your heart, and He knows what's happening in your relationships. Jesus knows, and even today, He is preparing you and me for what comes next. If we'll simply listen to Him, and if we'll simply live in humble surrender to Him, He will help prepare our hearts for what comes next. There is no pandemic that catches Jesus by surprise, but today, know that He knows full well what you and I need and how He can provide it. And He longs to provide it. Not only does He know, but Jesus loves. John 13 says that having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end. I don't want to undersell this. I want you to hear this clearly. Jesus loves you. And He loves you so fully and so completely that He went to a cross to die in your place, to provide forgiveness for your sin. Jesus loves you. He loves you to the very end of your rope, to the very end of your journey, and even into eternity. Jesus loves you in the good times and the bad. When you've been high on the summit in obedience to Him or low in the valley in rebellion against Him, Jesus loves you. He loves you now, and He loves you fully. Jesus loves you. He loves you to the end, and He loves you to His end. He loves you with all that He had. He loves you so much so that He gave His life. He died so that you in your death in sin might live. Jesus loves. Jesus knows, Jesus loves, and Jesus serves. And Jesus knows what's happening in your life, and He loves you to the end. And so even now, He's made it His business to serve you. It's important for us to realize that, yes, Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but He made Himself of no reputation, taking on the form of a servant and coming in the likeness of a man. Being found in appearance as a man, He humbled Himself, became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Yes, Jesus serves. As He knelt before His disciples and washed their feet, it was symbolic of Him laying down the royal robes of His honor and determining to give Himself away out of love for sinners like you and me by His death on the cross. Jesus recognized His power as King, and yet He humbled Himself to be servant who showers His followers with love. That's what Jesus has done for all who belong to Him. That is something that we've experienced. We celebrate the relationship that Jesus gives us with God, that He bridged the distance between us who are sinners and God who is holy. Now we celebrate this cleansing that He has created through His sacrifice, and we celebrate the call that He gives us even in this passage. As this episode closes, I want you to hear from Jesus again as He speaks to His disciples. In verse 12 of chapter 13, He says, "Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." As a recipient of Christ's life-shaping, soul-satisfying, death-killing love, we must serve. We're moved to action to serve others the way He has served us. So pick up the bowl and pick up the towel and find someone's feet to wash today.